By the time the truth finally surfaced, hundreds of millions of dollars had disappeared. The victims weren't gamblers chasing quick riches. They weren't Wall Street speculators. They were pastors, retirees, and lifelong church members who believed their money was helping God's work. For decades, the Baptist Foundation of Arizona had been one of the most trusted financial institutions in the state's religious community. People invested their savings because they believed it was safe. But behind that image of faith and stability, a financial disaster had already begun. What followed would become one of the most shocking religious financial scandals in American history. And the most unsettling part? The warning signs may have been there long before everything came crashing down. For most financial scandals, the story usually begins with greed. But this one began with faith. In 1948, a group of Southern Baptists in Arizona created an organization with a simple mission: help churches grow, support ministries, and provide financial services to Baptist communities. It was called the Baptist Foundation of Arizona. At first, there was nothing unusual about it. In fact, its purpose seemed noble. Churches needed funding, ministries needed support, communities needed a trusted financial partner. The foundation was created to fill that role. And for many years, it appeared to do exactly that. But what started as a mission to serve churches would eventually become something much bigger than anyone expected. Over the decades, the foundation steadily expanded its influence throughout Arizona. Church members heard about it from pastors, friends, and fellow believers. Unlike Wall Street firms and unfamiliar investment companies, this organization felt different. It felt familiar. It felt trustworthy. Most importantly, it felt safe. And that trust would become its greatest asset. As the years passed, more people began investing their money with the foundation. Many of them were not wealthy businessmen or professional investors. They were ordinary Christians, retirees, pastors, elderly couples who had spent decades saving for the future. Many believed their investments were doing two things at once: helping God's work and providing financial security for their families. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. But there was something else happening that few people noticed. The foundation wasn't just growing, it was becoming powerful. By the 1980s and 1990s, the Baptist Foundation of Arizona had established itself as one of the most respected religious financial organizations in the state. Its reputation was built on values that mattered deeply to its investors: integrity, stewardship, faith. People trusted the organization because they trusted the people behind it, and the leadership had an ambitious vision. They believed the foundation could continue expanding, serving more churches, funding more ministries, and managing larger amounts of money than ever before. The future seemed bright. The money kept flowing in, and with every new investor, the foundation's influence grew even stronger. To many people, there was no reason to doubt it. After all, this wasn't some unknown company operating in secret. It was connected to churches. It was connected to faith. And for countless investors, that connection meant everything. Year after year, more money entered the system. Millions became tens of millions. Tens of millions became hundreds of millions. The foundation's success appeared to confirm what everyone already believed. This was a trustworthy institution doing important work. The confidence was so strong that many investors rarely questioned what was happening behind the scenes. Why would they? The organization had spent decades earning their trust. And trust, once established, can be one of the most powerful forces in the world. But trust can also make people overlook warning signs. Because while investors saw stability, growth, and success, forces were beginning to move beneath the surface. For now, those problems remained hidden. The foundation continued growing, the money continued flowing, and the people who trusted it had no idea that the story was heading toward a very different ending. Because beneath the appearance of stability, a problem had already begun to spread, and the people running the foundation would soon face a decision that would change everything. The Baptist Foundation of Arizona started as a religious financial institution, but as it grew, it moved into something much more complicated. In the 1980s and early 1990s, the foundation began investing heavily in real estate projects. The idea was simple: use the growing pool of money from church members and retirees to invest, grow returns, and fund more ministry work. At first, it looked successful. Money from new investors kept coming in. Properties were being purchased. Projects were being launched. On paper, the foundation appeared to be expanding steadily. But the problem started when some of those real estate investments failed. Buildings didn't sell as expected. Property values dropped. Some projects tied up large amounts of money without producing returns. At first, these losses were small enough to manage, but over time they grew. And as the losses increased, the foundation faced a serious problem. The money they had promised to manage safely was no longer fully backed by real assets. This created pressure inside the organization, because admitting the truth would damage the foundation's reputation and shake the trust of thousands of church investors. So instead of fully reporting the losses, the foundation began to adjust how the numbers looked. Bad investments were shifted between internal entities. Loss-making properties were moved into separate companies linked to the foundation, and accounting methods were used to spread or delay the appearance of financial damage. On paper, it looked like the losses were being managed, but in reality, the underlying problem remained. The investments were still failing. As time went on, this system depended more and more on new money coming in, because new investments helped cover old losses. New funds from church members and retirees continued to enter the system, and that money helped keep everything running. This created a cycle. New funds came in, old losses were covered, reports still looked stable, and more people invested. From the outside, nothing seemed wrong. Church members continued trusting the foundation because it still carried its religious identity. Many believed their money was safe because it was connected to churches and ministry work. But internally, the gap between reality and the reported numbers kept growing. The actual financial condition was weakening even while public reports still showed stability. Some early warning signs began to appear. A few people noticed inconsistencies in financial reporting. Questions were raised about how assets were being valued and transferred. But these concerns were not strong enough to break public confidence, because for most investors, the foundation still felt safe. It still felt stable, and it still felt trustworthy. But by the mid to late 1990s, the pressure inside the system had become too large to ignore. The losses had accumulated. The structure holding everything together was becoming fragile, and the foundation was now relying heavily on continuous incoming money just to maintain its financial position. What had started as a simple investment system had gradually turned into a structure where hidden losses were being covered over time. And the longer it continued, the harder it became to correct without exposing everything. By the time investigators and regulators began looking more closely, the financial gap was already too wide, and the system that once looked stable was now close to breaking. By the late 1990s, the financial structure inside the Baptist Foundation of Arizona had become increasingly unstable. Losses from earlier investments had never been fully recovered. The system that had been used to shift and reclassify failing assets could no longer hide the growing gap between what the foundation owned and what it owed. At this point, the foundation was relying heavily on new incoming money to stay afloat, but the pressure was building faster than the money was coming in. Behind the scenes, financial irregularities began to attract attention from outside regulators and investigators. As they examined the foundation's records, the structure that had once appeared organized and stable started to reveal deep inconsistencies. Transactions between related entities were scrutinized, asset values were questioned, the internal flow of money became increasingly difficult to justify. As the investigation expanded, confidence in the foundation began to weaken, and once that confidence started to break, the flow of new investments slowed. This created a critical turning point, because without new money coming in at the same pace, the system could no longer sustain itself. The foundation was now exposed to the full weight of its accumulated losses. In 1999, the situation reached its breaking point. The Baptist Foundation of Arizona filed for bankruptcy. The collapse was sudden in public view, but it had been building for years beneath the surface. Once bankruptcy was declared, the full scale of the financial damage began to emerge. Hundreds of millions of dollars in losses were revealed. Investors discovered that many of the assets they believed were secure had either been overvalued, tied up in failing projects, or transferred within internal structures that masked their true condition. The people most affected were ordinary church members, retirees, and long-term investors who had placed their trust in the foundation over many years. When the foundation collapsed, those savings were significantly reduced or lost entirely. As the financial aftermath unfolded, legal action followed. Investigations examined how the losses had been recorded, how assets had been moved, and how the organization had continued operating while its financial position deteriorated. Executives and key decision-makers came under scrutiny as authorities worked to understand how the situation had been allowed to continue for so long without correction. Church communities connected to the foundation also felt the impact. The trust that had once supported the organization was deeply shaken, not only financially but emotionally, as many struggled to reconcile the collapse with the values the foundation had represented. Over time, the case became recognized as one of the most significant religious financial failures in the United States. It demonstrated how long-term financial loss, when hidden through internal restructuring and sustained by new inflows of money, can continue far beyond what would normally be possible in a transparent system. Eventually, what remained was the full outcome of years of accumulated financial pressure. The money was lost, the structure had collapsed, and the system that once appeared stable had fully broken down. Stories like this show that the biggest financial disasters don't always start with greed. Sometimes they start with trust. The Baptist Foundation of Arizona didn't collapse because people expected it to fail. It collapsed because too many people believed it never could. And that's the real warning from this story. When trust replaces accountability, even the most respected institutions can fall apart. Thank you for watching. If you want more real stories about forgotten frauds, financial scandals, and hidden truths behind major collapses, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.